All right, we're jumping right into a question that always gets people talking. Which nation is actually the strongest in the Muslim world? Now, the answer might not be as clear-cut as you think. So when you hear that question, what's the first country that pops into your head? You're probably thinking of a nation famous for its oil, or maybe one with a massive population, or one with a really powerful military, right? Well, whatever you're thinking, just hang on to that for a second. Because as we're about to see, the real answer, it's a lot more layered and honestly, way more fascinating than just a simple one-word answer. Okay, so let's really get into this. To tackle this big question the right way, we can't just pick one thing and call it a day. The whole idea of strength isn't that simple. So, to really get the full picture, we've got to break strength down. We need to look at it from a few completely different angles. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to look through four really crucial lenses. First, the raw power of a country's economy. Then, the sheer human scale of its population. After that, we'll look at the wealth of its people. And finally, you guessed it, its military might. So, let's kick things off with the economy. First up, the economy. You can think of a country's gross domestic product, its GDP, as the size of its financial engine. So, who's got the biggest one? And bam! Right out of the gate, we've got a twist. It's not just one country, it's a dead heat. We have a tie for the top spot between Saudi Arabia and Turkey. Yeah, we're talking about a GDP of roughly $830 billion for each of them. And what's really interesting here is you're seeing two totally different kinds of economic power. You've got Saudi Arabia, which is mostly fueled by its huge energy exports, and then you have Turkey, which is driven by a much more diverse industrial and manufacturing base. Now, to give you a sense of just how big that number is, that's an economy about the same size as Switzerland's. It just goes to show you what major players these two nations are on the world's economic stage. Okay, next up, we're shifting gears from money to people. Because a huge population isn't just a number, you know? It's a massive workforce, a giant market for goods, and it carries incredible cultural weight. And when it comes to this category, well, it's not even a competition. The undisputed leader, by an absolutely enormous margin, is Indonesia. With a population soaring over 273 million people, Indonesia isn't just the most populous Muslim country. It's one of the biggest countries on the planet, period. That is a mind-boggling amount of human capital. So, we've looked at the total size of the economy, but what about how that wealth is spread out? You know, how prosperous is the average person? For that, we're going to look at GDP per capita. And in this category, the winner is crystal clear. When you measure it by individual wealth, the richest Muslim nation is, without a doubt, Qatar. And to give you some perspective on just how wealthy that is, Qatar's GDP per capita means its citizens enjoy a standard of living that's right up there with people in super developed countries like Denmark and Sweden. All right, let's move to our final lens, and it's probably the most traditional one, military might. When people hear the word strength, this is often what they think of first. So, which nation has the most powerful armed forces? When you dig into the global firepower rankings, and these things analyze everything from tanks and jets to logistics and geography, one country consistently rises to the top: Pakistan. But here's the kicker. What's truly amazing isn't just that it's number one among Muslim-majority countries. It's where it stacks up against everyone else. Get this, Pakistan's military is ranked as the 7th most powerful in the entire world. That puts it in a very, very elite club, right alongside the globe's biggest superpowers. So we've looked through our four lenses: economy, population, wealth, and military. After all that, what's the final verdict? Who's the strongest? Well, as you can see, every single metric tells us a different story, doesn't it? We've got the economic twins, Saudi Arabia and Turkey, the population giant, Indonesia, the incredible individual wealth of Qatar, and the serious military force of Pakistan. So it's pretty clear there is no single strongest country. It's just not that simple. What we really have is this incredible mosaic of power. We have a group of different nations that lead in different ways, and each of them is a major player regionally and sometimes globally in their own unique right. And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. If strength really does have this many different faces, maybe the question we should be asking isn't who is the strongest, but how should we even be defining power here in the 21st century?